Welcome back to another post-media panel. I'm Bruce Garrioch, pleased to be joined today by Craig Button, TSN's Director of Scouting and a former NHL General Manager. And Craig, as I speak to you today, the Senators are preparing to face the Anaheim Ducks. They are one game under 500 as they close out a homestand and then begin a stretch, Craig, of playing 9 of their next 10 on the road as they'll begin a long road stretch because of the World Junior Championships here. Let's start with the Senators. What have you thought of them so far this season? They're in the mix for a playoff spot, and they're certainly not out of it.
No, they're not out of it at all, and they're in the mix. And I think that the good play by the Senators has given reason for lots of optimism. And then you see these steps backwards where you kind of, oh, geez, are they the same old Sens? And if you're Michael Andlauer, you're Steven Stais, or you're Travis Green, or you're a fan of the Ottawa Senators, you've seen signs of really good, solid play. And probably in their questioning is, why can't we have that just be on a more consistent basis? Perhaps it's a scenario where the team is good enough to show you those really good stretches of strong play, but they're still learning how to do it over a consistent period of time. I don't think there's any question they have talent. I don't think there's any question that they've addressed some of the areas on their team that needed bolstering, namely in net. And certainly now for the Ottawa Senators, the fan base and obviously the ownership and the management and coaching and the players, they want to take that next step. It's hard to take the next step. You can get to this point, and then that next step becomes a little bit harder. And I think right now that is probably the biggest challenge for Travis Green. And as you point out, I think it's really gracious of the Ottawa Senators, Michael Andlauer, to say, okay, the World Junior Tournament's here and we're going to have to go out on the road. That's a reality of what they do. This may be a really good opportunity for that team to be on the road, to be together, and you only have yourselves to spend time with for the most part. You're together, you're a group, and you're looking for galvanizing moments, galvanizing times. I think this could prove to be a galvanizing time for the Ottawa Senators, and I think the faithful, the Sens faithful, are hoping the same.
Well, and I think so too. And I think one of the things that I think a promising sign, I wanted to talk to you about two guys specifically. I think a promising sign in the last 4 or 5 games has been the play of Linus Ullmark. Anton Forsberg went in Sunday and he allowed 3 goals on 12 shots, and they lost 3-2 to the Islanders. And in the big scheme of things, they lost that game because of goaltending. And people say, well, why didn't they play Ullmark? Well, goalies don't play many back-to-back games late anymore. But I think what we've seen in the last 4 or 5 games from Ullmark is that he's the Ullmark they expected to get from the Boston Bruins.
And that's why they acquired him. They wanted to bolster that position. So there's a couple things I'll say about Linus. Number one, he's been in a tandem situation in Boston for the last few years, right? So, if you're going to give him a little bit more of a workload, you got to get him. He's got to get himself into that state of mind more than anything. Okay, this is what I got to do. And you're right. Goaltending now in the NHL is basically a tandem spot. We can say whether it's 48-34 or it's 50-32. It's really around that 50 mark for a number one goaltender, I think. I think that's where it's at. Maybe you bump up to 52. The second part of this is, and for Linus, is you're learning the intricacies and the movements and the rhythms of your own defense. So trying to get comfortable in the net. How's that player going to block a shot? How do I need to set the puck? When Ed Belfour, I remember when we got Ed Belfour in Dallas in 1997 as a free agent. And he was getting frustrated with some of the defensemen, and the defensemen were getting frustrated with him because Eddie was demanding, and Eddie said, here's what I'm going to do. And they were used to something different. So I think that we're into that moment. What you're seeing now from Linus is really encouraging. He didn't win the Vezina Trophy by accident, Bruce. He's a really competent, capable goaltender, but understanding that there's going to be a period of time where you're trying to acclimate yourself. And I think the encouraging sign is that Linus Ullmark is showing that ability to be a top-notch goaltender. Because simply put, and then, I mean, it happens, But Sunday, the Senators played an excellent game, and they lost it because of goaltending. They didn't lose it because of anything else they did. The goaltending wasn't good enough, and that's why they ended up losing the game. So Linus getting back in there and being at that level, really encouraging for the Sens.
You know, Craig, during the pandemic in 2020, I talked to you ad nauseum about the 2020 draft class, and you know, you believe strongly in two guys that they selected. Number one, though, was Tim Stützle. And can you just talk to me about the evolution of Tim Stützle a bit here? I just was doing the numbers before he came on. He's on pace for 103 points this season. He's on pace for 30 goals if he can stay healthy. He's really turned himself into an elite player. And who did you compare him to at the time, and what do you think he's become?
Well, you're testing my memory now. I'll have to. I'll have to try to pull it out from that deep memory of the hard drive in there. But Tim's a superstar. People go, "Oh, yeah." Well, I think
you said that at the time.
I think he's a superstar. He's the best player from that draft. I don't think anybody would quibble with that. He's the best player from that draft. I mean, I know Jake went fifth and everything. It's not about, but I think he's the best player in the draft. I like young players. They come into the league. We see it all the time. They come into the league and there's all this promise, and with it a certain hype, and then with it expectations. But the players mature at different rates, and I think what everybody's seeing now, Tim Stützle is a young player, but he's taken those lessons, he's taken those experiences, and now you're seeing a player players come in the league thinking they can do it. Then they start to feel, oh, well, I can do it. Now he knows he can do it. And that's the levels that you go through. He knows he can go out on the ice and impact the game. He's not thinking he can. He's not thinking he will. He knows he can, and he does. And that's part of the maturity of a young player. That's what you're seeing in Tim Stützle. He's a dangerous player. When he steps out on the ice, if you're an opponent, you better know where Tim Stützle's at. It's funny how, and we talk about hockey, the culture or whatever you want to call it. And, oh, he's a diver. Oh, he does all this. Like, it's always interesting. Usually when people accuse you of things that they don't like, it's because he does things really well and they're trying to push you down. That's usually opponents. And I think for Tim Stützle, when you have that type of player, that type of an impact that he can provide, if you don't have, as you know, Bruce, you know this better than anybody. They just celebrated the pizza line, right? Yeah. Just look at the quality that was there, right? If you don't have the quality of player in those key positions, in the net, on the blue line, up the middle of the ice, your chances of having success are reduced. The Senators don't have that problem. They acquired Ullmark. They get Sanderson in that draft with Stutzle, Sanderson at 5 and Stutzle at 3. And I'm not even. You got Brady Tkachuk at 4, and you got some good players. Bottom line is, and I think that's what frustrates. Maybe frustration is my word, not. But you're kind of looking for a bigger jump in the team, and that's what they're looking for, right?
Because there's a lot of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
but that's where they're at. But I mean, Tim, and the other thing Tim has, he's exciting. I mean, he's another. He grabs that puck, he gets on the ice. Yeah, oh yeah, and that's a quality you want.
Like I look at him, Craig, and one of the things I talked to Travis Green about him today. Travis Green said he believes that sometimes centers just take a little longer to develop, and that's just the way it is. That there are dynamic, skilled centers across this league who had to become better defensive players, but it took them time. And do you think that's what we're seeing with Stutzle a little bit here?
Absolutely. And I think Travis can relate. Travis was a brilliant offensive player coming out of junior hockey, could score, could shoot the puck, and then he became a really good defensive player. So I think having those experiences that Travis had as a player, I think that he can really help Tim, grow that part of his game. But for me, one of the biggest things is understanding and for Travis to help Tim understand that defense isn't going to take away from your game. It's going to enhance your game. And I think that's some of the hardest things for the younger centers, the younger players in the league when we talk about defensive play without the puck.
Now, I look at talking about one of the young players, a guy who struggled this year, but he's still probably their best defenseman is Jake Sanderson. He's only got one goal in 27 games. He's a minus player. He's only got 3 points at even strength. Is this, I don't know, sophomore jinx, or is it, is it just, where do you kind of feel like his game is at?
Jacques Leperrier. I need to preface that. The great Jacques Leperrier won a Norris Trophy, was a great defensive coach in the NHL. This is what he told me many years ago when the Minnesota North Stars were the Minnesota North Stars. We were sitting in the stand. He said, defensemen, for the most part, up until the age of about 23, 24, are very much in an apprentice stage. They might be playing in the league. They might be playing lots of minutes in the league, but they're really learning. They're learning their craft. And he said it's like anybody else that has to apprentice, whether it be a surgeon, whether it be an electrician, whether it be a plumber, you're apprenticing. And you can be doing the work, but you're apprenticing to really learn how to take control and be in command. And he said it's no different for NHL defensemen. And then you hit that age of 23, 24, after you've got these layers of apprenticeship under you. Now you take off, and now you find that consistency. I mean, Jake comes into the league as a young player. He's a brilliant skater. He's a brilliant competitor. The league doesn't know him. And so
Yeah.
now he's able to take all those. So now we talk about the sophomore jinx. I mean, the sophomore part of it is now Jake's trying to adjust to how other players are adjusting to his strengths. There's no more secret about Jake Sanderson. A player can't now say, geez, I didn't realize how good a skater he was. They all know he's a great skater, right? So they
Right.
take that away from you. So you got to find ways to adjust. And I think that's where Jake finds himself. There's two things I'll say about Jake. He's a very, very intelligent person and player. And he's a highly competitive player. So I have no qualms in saying, just relax. Like Jacques Leperrier said, he's just apprenticing. He's a stud. He's a stud, and he will be a stud for a lot of years in the NHL on the blue line of the Senators.
One of the things we haven't seen in Ottawa for a while is how do I got to be careful here. Let's put it this way. Michael Andlauer stepped up for his organization and spoke out about soft tampering with involving the Rangers and Brady Tkachuk. Tampering is a tough thing to prove at the best of times. I think what Andlauer and Stales told me this last week is they're always going to stand up for the players. And I think that the bottom line is that Michael Andlauer just wanted this organization, the people in this organization, and by extension, the people in the city, that he has their back. And he didn't look, Larry, you and I know Larry Brooks. He didn't make it up. Someone told him, whether it was someone internally in the Rangers organization or someone third party externally. Michael Andlauer, though, wanted to talk to the league about this to at least get their attention. And I don't think anybody would blame him for being upset, Craig.
Well, I think there's a lot of things when it comes to Michael, and you nailed number one. Number one is he's committed to the city of Ottawa, and he's committed to the Senators, and he's committed to making it a franchise that can not only be championship caliber on the ice, but championship caliber off the ice. And how you back up your players, how you back up the people that work with you. Michael's always been that. Stevie Staios, I shouldn't say Stevie, it's almost like he's back as a 17-year-old. Steve Staios, he's a team player. He's committed. He's in the fight. He's in the fight with his players because that's how he was as a player. And so he understands that. The frustrations that I talked about with the fan base and everything, well, guess what? Michael Andlauer's a fan too. And so he feels some of those frustrations and he wants to see the team do a little bit better. So there's a little bit of frustration. Then you get these news reports coming out and you're right. We all know where there's smoke, there's fire. And wherever that fire was started or how it was started, we know there's whether it's a big flaming fire or there's just embers or somebody's trying to get something moving in a direction. So we know that. But Michael's standing up and saying, that's not the way it works, getting the league's attention. And again, saying that, like, hey, don't be messing with us. I think another big part of this is don't be messing with us because I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be counted. And you're not going to just push us. The other thing, and you know it, Bruce, and I think everybody, the fact that Michael Andlauer was in the process of buying the team, he didn't know anything that was going on with respect to the down off trade and all that, and he still feels jilted by the fact that they got a first round draft pick taken away from him. So there's these frustrations that build in different areas, and for Michael, he's proud. He's a proud person. He's a proud owner, and he's not going to your point, he's not letting anybody, push the Ottawa Senators around. And that's how you want to be on the ice. That's how you want to be off the ice.
Well, it's interesting too, Craig, and I think what he's going to try and do with that Dadonov thing, and I've mentioned this to other people, is I think he's going to try and get an extension from the league and see if, even if they don't make the playoffs this year, I don't see them giving up that first round pick this year. I think they'll kick it down to next year. And if they can get Gary Bettman to extend them another 3 years, they'll try and push it that or to then, and then just hope that at some point Bettman does for them what he did for the New Jersey Devils, right? Like,
It was a complete circumvention by the New Jersey Devils, and Lou waited and waited, and then they gave him back his first round draft pick. And I'm just going to say this. I mean, what Michael Andlauer had nothing to do with it. So why is a new owner, so I'm going to look at it from this thing. A new owner comes in and says, I want to buy the Ottawa Senators. So now you have not only the Ottawa Senators in a really good place with an owner, with the economics and the finances. He's also going to develop. There's going to be a new arena, a new entertainment area, right? Like we're talking about a full commitment. He had nothing to do with this. Why are you going to make him pay? like again. So I guess if I was talking to Gary Bettman would have an answer for me, I'm sure. And he has to hear it from a lot of the other owners and other managers. But at the same time, I think that the precedent is there for returning the first round draft pick to the Ottawa Senators.
Well, speaking of first round draft picks, one guy I did want to discuss with you as we switch topics here is Carter Yakemchuk. He was passed up for the World Junior Camp here in Ottawa. And look, I profess this by saying Hockey Canada does not owe Ottawa anything, okay? But people in Ottawa are going to buy a lot of tickets. And I thought maybe, just maybe, they could throw the Senators in their organization and their fans by extension a bone by maybe inviting their defenseman at least to camp.
So I think you make a really good distinction there. Invite him to camp. So I'll go through a little bit of it's kind of my preamble.
Right.
When you're playing for Canada's junior team, Canada's Olympic team, Canada's Four Nations face-off team, there's so much talent, and we know there's a lot of talent, and we know that that sometimes some good players don't get selected. It doesn't mean they're not good, but here's where I go with it, and it's much along this, like. Carter Yakemchuk has been a great offensive player. Big booming shot. He's demonstrated it at the junior level. And now you have the opportunity to give Dave Cameron a weapon. You're like, they don't have a weapon like that on their blue line. They don't. So you say to yourself, and I feel the same way about Zane Parekh, and Zane Parekh did come to camp now because of the injury to Harrison Brunek. So, but get them to camp. And and maybe I should be criticized for this, and maybe, but I'm not hesitant to say this. So you want to bring Bo Aki to camp? That's wonderful. And you want to bring Cameron Allen to camp? Wonderful. On those two guys' best days ever, they're not close to Carter Yakemchuk and Zane Parekh. So I'm not saying they should be on the team, but they should be at the camp.
Yeah.
They haven't done anything, in my view, and again, they haven't done anything, in my view, to not warrant and give them a chance to show what they have. And then if you say they're not good enough for our team, that's good. But I think they should have been at the camp. I really do. Bruce, I did a projection of a roster back on November 1st. I had them both on my team.
and then, like you say, they bring Parekh and he still gets passed over. Now, Steve Stales mentioned something to me about him being hurt now, so it's probably a non-factor as far as Yakemchuk goes. But is also, Craig, sometimes you and I are looking at it, from the outside. Do you think internally, when you have this kind of tournament, your thinking is different too in the kind of roster you want to put together? Maybe that's why guys like him do get passed over for a camp.
Well, I think you're always looking at what you're trying to put together as a team. I mean, for Team Canada junior team, it's 10 days. If you want to compete for the gold medal, that means you got to play 7 games in 10 days, and you got to be able to compete hard. But here's the way I look at it. It's not so much about who you're going to choose on your team or what your rhythm, but when you have a camp and you're going to invite players. Andrew Crystal is the best power play guy in the CHL. He's the
Yeah.
best power play guy. So here's a guy that might have some areas of his game that aren't as strong, but bringing him to camp now gives Dave Cameron and his coaching staff a chance to say, okay, here's how we can use him. Here's how we can put him into spots where he can help our team. Bruce, when it gets down to the hard parts of the tournament against good teams, it's the fine lines. And the tournament now affords you 14 skaters, 8 defensemen, and 3 goalies. So you can sit out 2 players, and let's say you have Yakemchuk, and you go, okay, geez, we can put somebody else in. It's not like you only have 7 defensemen anymore. You can have 8. And so I'm a believer in, okay, what are the areas you want to have? And the power play is a big one. I felt that at the very least, if you have Parekh and Yakemchuk come, they could be just like Cale Makar in 2018. He's your 7th defenseman. He's going to help on the power play. You're going to put him in offensive situations, and that's how you're going to use them. You might not be comfortable as a coaching staff using them in other areas, and that's fine. But I think you have to get players of that talent, of that skill set. And like I said, I'm not here. I'm happy for Bo Aki. I'm happy for
Yeah.
Cameron Allen, and I don't want, but like those guys have never been close to Yakemchuk and Parekh. And I think that that's something that can always help you.
Last question: as you prepare to spend your part of your Christmas in Ottawa and 10 days here for what I think is going to be a great atmosphere in the city for this tournament. But Craig, how? And this is a really general question. What are your thoughts on how Canada will do?
I think we're hitting a stretch here with this cohort of players, and the cohort is the 2005, 2006, 2007, and the 2008 born players. I think you could see another run of gold medals. Now the competition is pretty significant, but this cohort you have Schaefer and McKenna who are '07 borns that are going to be on the team in my view. They're at camp. You have Porter Martone. I mean, Jack Ivan Kovic, the goaltender, he's in '07. So that automatically, if they're not in the NHL, that automatically puts you into a 3-year period. They're really good. You go and look, they've won. These players have all been part of winning. They've contributed to winning for Team Canada at various international events over the last number of years. I think they're every bit the favorite. The USA is going to be a favorite. They're very good too. Sweden is always a hard out. I think they're the 3 top teams. If I go back to the U18 tournament, the last 3 winners, Canada in 2024, USA in 2023, and Sweden in 2022. And that's the '05s and the '06s and the '07s.
Okay.
So I don't think it's any accident that anybody would put them in the fair. But Canada has got and it's going to be a great atmosphere. I think back to 2009, Bruce,
Oh my God.
and how phenomenal it was. And there's another little thing that's happening here 16 years later in Ottawa, not just the World Junior Tournament, but in that tournament of '09, because we started with the draft, but in that draft, there was 2 players that were vying to be first overall, John Tavares for Canada and Victor Hedman for Sweden. And this 2025 draft has 3 players vying for first overall, Matthew Schaefer and Porter Martone for Canada, and James Hagans, who broke the U18 record that Nikita Kucherov had for most points in a tournament in 2024. They're all vying for first overall. So not only do you have the great international competition with Canada being one of the top favorites, and you also have these 3 players, just like in '09, vying for first overall. So there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of different angles to be able to take when you look at this tournament. And we know what fantastic fan support is going to be there for the entire World Junior Tournament.
Well, and I think of that 2009 New Year's Eve game
Oh,
between Ottawa between Canada and USA. I mean, that's one of the greatest hockey moments I've seen live in person. I think, as far as games go.
it was amazing.
Yeah.
Pat Quinn was the head coach, and
Yeah.
they were, as you know, Bruce, they were down 3-0. And I remember I was sitting in the corner across from the benches in that upper tier. I remember looking at the bench, and looking at Pat, you wouldn't know if they were up 3-0 or down 3-0. The composure that Pat had, and if you recall, I remember talking to Pat after the game, or not me. I mean, he was asked after the game if he ever thought about taking Dustin Tokarski out of the net. He said it never crossed my mind once.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I really appreciate your time today, and enjoy the holiday season and enjoy Ottawa. And we really appreciate your insight today. Thanks for joining us, Craig Button,
Yeah.
former National Hockey League general manager.
Thanks for having me, Bruce, and really look forward to spending time with you in Ottawa during the World Junior.
It's going to be fun.